the thing open with the Teams app open on the screen with the presentation. So okay.
I'm wondering if there's something about sharing control. Is it our Teams invite?
Yeah.
Jason's on. Yeah.
It's okay. I don't mind. It's just you need to be. So we'll start with a hospice overview. So just to start, are any of you familiar with hospice, had personal experience or worked for a hospice? Okay, so you probably know the basics. Okay, good. All right. Were those positive experiences overall?
Yeah, for myself, yes. Yep, I had both parents living in our home with hospice at their end of life. So yes, personal experience, and then have worked for home care and hospice.
Okay, good. All right. Everybody else has either taken care of a dying patient or had a hospice experience in your own family or with a loved one. Okay, all right, good. So this will probably be somewhat of a review for you then. So hospice is not a place you go, right? It's a way of giving care. It's a team-based, holistic phenomenon of care that we can deliver in a variety of settings. So we can see patients or help patients at home, in skilled nursing facilities, assisted living, independent living, in hospitals. There is a form of hospice that can be provided in hospitals, and also in residential hospice houses. And Good Shepherd does have a residential hospice house. And when I say residential, I mean it's not a medical model, in the sense that it's staffed by LPNs and we have home health aides as well, but it's not for patients who need high level intensive type end of life care. So patients with poorly managed symptom complexes probably wouldn't be appropriate for that because we don't have enough skilled clinical staff there. It's more for folks who live alone and can no longer care for themselves adequately as they begin the dying process, or for respite for families or caregivers who need a break. That's usually more of the reason why folks get admitted to our hospice residential facility.
And Alexis, just so you know, Nancy McEwen and I met earlier this week.
Okay.
So I just made the team familiar with the Parlin House.
Yes, we have a 10-bed facility.
Yeah. And we'll be helping hopefully in the future with any, vacancies or staff vacancies you might have as well.
Yeah, when you run a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week facility, there's lots of fill-in needs, right? There's lots of sticking your fingers in the holes. Yeah. Although I have to say, Good Shepherd in general has a very low attrition rate for its staff. We tend to keep people, which is wonderful. We're a nonprofit organization also, I think, which sets us apart a little bit from some of the other hospice providers. We really are very mission driven. In general, the intent of hospice is neither to hasten the patient's end of life or postpone or prolong life artificially. We're there to companion patients and families as they move through the natural process of dying. We focus on symptom management across life domains. What I mean by that is we don't just focus on physical symptoms, although often patients are most concerned about experiencing distressing physical symptoms, especially pain. But we also look at the impact of end of life on all of their life domains, their spiritual life, their roles and relationships with family, loved ones, and the wider world, their ability to do activities that bring them pleasure and comfort. And we pay a lot of attention to the psychosocial concerns around end of life. Many people, I think, struggle as much with the existential as they do with the physical. And we're here for both or all. The goal, though, is to make every day the best day that it can be. Many of our families and patients come into hospice, even though they've elected hospice, which tells us that they have some level of prognostic awareness, right? They know that this, in order to be eligible for hospice, we have to certify that they have a 6-month life expectancy or less. So they know that the end is quote unquote near, but very often in a day-to-day way, their denial is functional, right? It allows them pretending like it's not happening or going forward with each day, trying to move towards better, right? Is a coping mechanism that's actually usually very functional and allows people to get up and do what they need to do without being crushed by a loss of hope. So one of the things that hospice does is help people refocus their hope on goals that are achievable. That would make each day better. And I think the cornerstone of hospice is that the family, rather than paid caregivers or institutional caregivers, is the primary caregiver. And when I say family, I mean that in a person's chosen family as well as their family of origin. Many of our patients don't have close biologic family ties, but have chosen family, friends, a church family that end up being caregivers for them. And so we include that in the loose definition of family. Anyone who's involved with the patient and the patient's end of life process is under our umbrella as well. So that should not be unfamiliar to you. So what is hospice actually? And I mentioned, and I'll say it here again, that we acknowledge and address all of the domains of life that death will impact. That we are a partnership between the patient, their loved ones, and our teams. And truly, we try really hard not to position ourselves as the knowledge givers. Our hierarchy, both in our own organization, but also in our relationships with patients and families, is very flat. We tend to try to present as a resource that these people, they have ownership over the patient and their family and the circumstances, and we're experts in the management of end of life and symptoms. And so together, right, we can actually come up with really good, effective plans of care, but neither one of us would be able to do it alone. So we don't come in and position ourselves as the knowledge givers. We tend more towards a mutual explorer kind of role. Like, what can we do? How can we help? And this is necessary sometimes because families misunderstand that hospice is not a 24-hour, we move in with you, take over kind of service, right? But also to make them feel companioned on their journey and that they have a quarterback, if you will, or someone that they can turn to 24 hours a day in a time of need. And our plan of care is led by the patient and the family goals. So we do have, hospice does have a standing orders that come down to us from CMS, the Center for Medicare Services, that tell us things that we must address in all of our hospice patients. And, you know, the bulk of those remain during the patient's tenure in hospice. There are things like we can change the visit frequency. The RN can pronounce. We can put on antifungal cream. They're very basic, and we can put in a catheter, that kind of thing. But the rest of the care plan is pretty individual, and it's a living document in the sense that people's needs change over time, right? And so the document has to change, right? The blueprint for care, if you will, has to also change with the patient. And so there's a lot of updating and completion of goals in a hospice plan of care, but it's crafted, predicated on what the family and patient tell us is what's important to them. So hospice care includes a team, which includes, I was going to say led by, but I had just emphasized that we have a flat hierarchy. So it isn't actually led by the doc. So we have each of our teams, we have 4 teams here at Good Shepherd. We have a North team, which is north of Boston, South, just south of Boston. We have Boston, and then we have a multicultural team that serves patients who speak Spanish, Cantonese or Mandarin or Russian as their primary language. And all of our caregivers and team members speak that language primary when they're assigned to those cases. And those folks, because they're spread out all over, that is not a geographic team, meaning they go wherever the patient is. And those programs are growing, and we're continuing to try to grow into additional like cultural niches, if you will. So we have a medical director. Each team is assigned its own doc, and that is their full-time job. We don't have any part-time physicians with the exception of our on-call people. So people who cover nights, we do have some part-timers there. We have nurse care coordinators. These are kind of, like I said, the quarterbacks of the team who see the patient usually the most frequently and have the best kind of 360-degree view of the patient's status at any given time. Each team has a social worker or 2 or 3, depending on the size of the team, and same for spiritual care providers. Our spiritual care providers are non-denominational, meaning they can see a patient that practices any faith tradition, but we do have a Jewish, a Buddhist, a Christian, and a Catholic. If folks do want to do specific faith rituals or engage in specific faith conversation, we can cross-pollinate from another team. So if our Catholic person is on South and I've got a patient on North who really wants to see a Catholic Eucharistic minister, I can switch over. And also our home health aides, we have a good sized stable of home health aides. Unfortunately, as many of you probably know, when I started in hospice, which was a really long time ago, we used to promise people that they could get an aide every day of the week, right? You'll have an aide an hour and a half every day. Well, the pandemic, took care of that. We don't do that anymore. We usually tell people they can have an aide 2 to 3 times a week for an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. Having said that, we do have many patients who get aide services 7 days a week or 5 days a week. And so we do still decide on a case-by-case basis and do our best to provide what patients and families are asking for. But our waiting list at this point is, anywhere between 25 and 40 patients at any given time. So I imagine Melissa was jumping for joy when she connected with you.